It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. I am so excited today. I have to tell you, I have two people who I got to know. You hear me so often speak on Her Success Story about the importance of developing relationships and building relationships. And one thing leads to another and another. And today's interview is a classic example of how that happened. A colleague of mine, a friend of mine over the years who helped me do a TEDx talk back, whatever year that was, not that long ago, it seems. But my friend Frank connected me to his friends, George and Fred. And they said, you have to do some stuff together. And I just had the honor and the pleasure to speak on speak events that George and Fred are in building this incredible global brand. So let me introduce you to my guests. Fred, Banny, George, and Andriopoulos. And I'm sure I got that wrong, George. Please help me.
Andriopoulos, but very close.
Andriopoulos are two men who have been part of a movement to change the way the world is hearing things, a movement to speak and be heard and listen. And they're pulling topics together that so many people are leaning into. I could go on and on about their bios. These are real top line professionals. You guys could read about that later. Fred, George, thank you for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you, Ivy. Great to be here.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me, what was the catalyst to start Speak? I know a little bit of the backstory, but I'd love our listeners to hear it from both of you, both TEDx speakers, both movers and shakers in your worlds.
Yeah, so I'll give you the beginnings of it, and then Fred can, sort of let you know where it went afterwards. The beginnings of it were that Fred and I are both public speakers. Amongst other things, we are both professionals that own our own other businesses and work in other areas. But we're public speakers. We're change makers. We're people that believe that the vehicle of having a microphone and a stage is super important, and that we have to use that to share our voices. And so we've done that through the years ourselves. We met coincidentally at our first TEDx event that we both spoke at as former TEDx speakers. Watched each other's talks. We formed a brotherhood, and became fast friends, started working together in different professional capacities, and then personally became friends. Our families became tied together, and we're stuck with each other now for life, right?
Yes, sir.
And so as we sort of evolved from just speakers to getting behind the stage and building stages for others, just because that's kind of who we are. We want to learn a craft and then help others elevate themselves through that craft as well. We started producing TEDx shows for a number of years. And I'm going to not forget our partner and co-leader for Speak, Jason Martin, who was part of that team as well. Over the years of doing it, we evolved as individuals. We started pinpointing things that were missing, right? Things that particular platform did very well, but there was more room for doing other things out there. And we started having these conversations. And initially, I conceptualized the idea for Speak and the business model. But once that was all done, I was very aware that the team is much stronger than the individual, and that I would need to work with individuals that could help me elevate and build this global platform. And Fred and Jason were the first two people that I thought of. And so before anything really launched, it was just a concept on paper. I sat down with the two of them. They saw the vision. They added things that I never could have thought of on my own to that vision to now create a brand new unified vision. And here we go, right? And I'll let Fred take it from here after that.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ivy. Like I mentioned, great to be here. And you pretty much kind of cover a lot of our origin story. What I would love to add, like you mentioned, Ivy, about the importance of relationship. You know, George mentioned how we met on our first TEDx stage. And after that, you know, we form a friendship, form a brotherhood. Coincidentally, I was involved with organizing another entrepreneurship conference in our area. And I invited George to speak on that stage. And that led to us even becoming much closer. Our third partner and co-leader, Jason Martin, so
Thank you
happened
for
to
mentioning Jason's name. He is outstanding. And when working with the three of you together, there is such brilliance. I just had to interject there for a sec.
Oh,
Thank you for that.
thank you. Yes, absolutely. Jason is a valuable part of who we are. We call ourselves the tripod, right? Yes, you know, a tripod, it cannot stand without all three legs. So Jason was actually hired to be the producer of that event. I did not know Jason at the time. I believe George and Jason were
I
acquainted.
knew Jason.
They go way back, but I did not know, right? So talking about relationship and just the power of connection. Fast forward to when George approached us all, and then we started reminiscing. How did we meet one another? George and I, that path was clear, right? And then, you know, Jason came into the picture, at least as it relates to me. And we've found this thing as we know it now to be speak, like George mentioned, he conceptualized the entire idea of what the platform will be. And when we brought it, we added, you know, other things because we co-produce TEDx event with George. George was the executive producer of TEDx Farmingdale. And so working together, you kind of find your groove. Because for me, I just don't go, especially business partnership with anybody, like values has to align. And it was a long time. George and I met in 2017. And so because we just like vibe together and we talked about how we can work together, but we understood like we're not going to force it. It has to make sense. There has to be integration and alignment. And Speak was the thing that just really aligned because we were both, like you mentioned, passionate about impacting people, impacting the world for good, amplifying voices because we understand the power of stories. And that's what Speak does. So, you know, that has led us to where we are today. And we are excited about what it is that we are building. And the future is bright. So we're very excited to dive into this conversation with you and just to share everything that, you know, at least can help other people on their journey as well.
So I'm going to jump in here for a second. Over owning a couple of businesses over 30 some odd years. Okay. I've had partners at different stages, and some have been great, some have been okay, and some have not been so great. And Fred, you hit the nail on the head. When values align, possibility is explosive. You know, that to me is the bottom line truth. When you go into any venture with somebody, when your values are not aligned, that venture is never going to have the long-term impact, which is what you're creating at Speak. So go ahead, George.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because Fred hit the nail on the head in terms of values aligning. And Fred and I, because we're speakers and we were in this world as, you know, quote unquote thought leaders, people who are very introspective and take a look at their journeys and experiences and the things that we've learned along the way, not just from our journeys, but, you know, being educated. And we come up with these set of opinions and thoughts that we put onto paper, we put onto a microphone and whatever the case is. So we already knew that our values aligned, but funny enough to form a partnership, because I've been where in the same place that you've been at, Ivy. I've had partners many times. Some of them have not worked out just as a matter of it just wasn't a fit. Some of them was, you know, the business didn't work. Some of them, the partners didn't fit. And some of them I was the problem too, right? because not every situation works for us or for others. And so getting into this with really three completely different personalities, similar in a lot of ways, but different in a lot of ways, was really interesting. So the genesis of even our partnership over the last year and a half, if you've been like behind the scenes watching it, it's a beautiful thing. It's a relationship. It's a relationship like you would have with a significant other. It's a relationship like you would have with a sibling. Um, you know, there's ebbs and flows. And as we've sort of discovered who we are as individuals and gone further into those values, further into, you start working closely, and it's harder when you're working closely. You get you're intertwined with people on a daily basis, and all of a sudden the facade of what you put on as, oh, this is calm, cool me or whatever. Now it's those moments where that other person comes out and everybody starts to see it. So we've experienced that genesis as partners, and we've seen all the sides of each other. And I'm sure there's many more that we haven't seen. We've seen all those sides. We've sat down as brothers. We've dealt with them. We've worked through them, and you couldn't find a stronger partnership now. It's like that. It's like that couple that has been through it and came out the other side, and they're like, oh, nothing can break us now. Right. So that's,
and I'm definitely going to chime in here.
Yes, please do.
I will say, and when I had one of my greatest partners I've ever had, who today is a brother to me. Okay, and we have not done business together, been in business together now. I mean, Slater Success is 16 years old. Let's call it 14 years, because that took me a couple of years that I divested myself of my printing company and it became his. I'm just gonna say, we always laugh that we spent more time together than we did with either of our spouses. And that was the catalyst to bring our families together, so we could all have and see the great quality time. But, being in producing speak, I believe you guys, because I think I mentioned this in my speech, in my speak talk, was that I was a dancer. So when you're in that production world, early in my life, not recently, but, for many, many years, and performing for many, many years, when you're in that production world, you really see there's going to be hiccups, if I say it politely, mildly, and you have to be working with people that you truly align with and can work through the hiccups to crises in various moments as you need to.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ivy. And George mentioned relationship, right? And that's exactly what it is, because how I look at it is, your business is to serve your life, not the other way around, right? Your business is just a vehicle, and we're literally doing life together. And through this, our family has become tighter. And oftentimes people, will run away from friction, but truth is held in friction. And one of the things that we've always talked about is to keep the lines of communication open, because the moment that line shuts down, we're going downhill. It does not matter how uncomfortable the conversation is, we have to have that. And just like any relationship, like George mentioned, it has not been without its challenges or ebbs and flow, but because, number one, we respect each other as men and people who are professionals and expert within their own domain. And also we respect one another as brothers, and knowing that foundationally, regardless of if we disagree or have different perspective on certain things, I know that number one, you have the best interest for me as a person, as a brother, and for the business. And when you have that as your jump off point, I personally believe there's really no challenges or obstacle or situations you cannot overcome and work through, right? And that's the thing that we have been able to get to and still growing through. Because like George mentioned, there's still other parts in life. Because as you go to different levels and you ascend, different challenges and different,
Yes.
Opportunities for growth, I like to say, will present itself, right? And I couldn't ask for any other two gentlemen to travel this journey with, because take everything apart. I love them, one. I respect them, two. I respect their expertise, and I want the best for them. And when we put that together as a team, you know, we've been blessed to platform some incredible stories, which is the reason why we started this thing in the first place. Because like Josh mentioned, when we were working with the other brand, there were certain stories that we just could not platform because it did not fit within the confines of that. So we decided, okay, innovation, we are problem solvers, right? We everywhere we go, we bring value. So what can we do to elevate and to give these people opportunities? Speak was the response, speak was the answer. And now I cannot tell you the relationship we've built, and just with some of the speakers, all of the speakers really, and just the stories we've been able to hear and experience. And you know, people come to our shows and they say it's like a therapeutic session because they experience just the spectrum of emotions, right? And it's been a beautiful thing because we've been able to do the hard work and work alongside, and it shows, you know, during the events. Because if we were a mess behind the scene, it would be a mess in front of the camera, you know. So yeah.
Well said. So I want to let's talk about building this brand. Okay. So you're not newbies to the business world, any of you. Okay. You are all professional speakers. You all had this background in production, speaking, business. You all brought something. Where, you know, when we start a business, when we start something, it usually often starts with a vision. From what the vision was created that few years ago to what you're seeing come to fruition today, what do you see? What is the evolution? I mean, I know you've had global stages now. So let me hear a little bit about where the vision was and where you are today.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. It's a beautiful thing for a couple of reasons. Let's say creative vision and business model, because it's two different things. I in my other world, I own a management consulting firm. I'm a business strategist. I'm a turnaround expert. I design businesses. I can strategize business. And I'm so proud of Speak because as far as the business model, my ethos when I create a business or a business strategy is that it has to, on day one, think about year 10. Has to think about 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And so you have to design a business to scale. You have to look at your big, hairy, audacious goals and think, what do we want to do? And sure, that stuff's going to change. But from a model perspective, that day one design is still in place and really has not changed from a business perspective. From a creative perspective, this is where the partnership came into play. Little known fact, Speak was supposed to be an audio only platform until Jason and Fred came into the partnership, who then fought, right? To not fought for the idea that video is important. And now I'm of the mindset of, oh, I'm not turning down anything. Show the group how this is valuable. And then your idea becomes the thing and not the old idea. And they did. And we figured out from a budget perspective how we can make that work for every single event while matching production quality and whatever. And boom, we became a predominantly video platform with an audio component as well, right? Do the looks of shows, the sounds of shows change over time? Of course, we get to know what a Speak Talk is more and more with each event. You know, event one, Speak Beginnings. I remember looking at these two guys at the end of the 10th talk, and I said, well, we nailed it. Like, this is insane. These are good. And then every single event, it's like we learn, and then people teach us, our speakers teach us what they can bring to the table, and you go, oh, I never thought of that. Right. So the creative part is always going to evolve. Bottom line is, we believe in the evolution of things, and we believe that the platform will take itself to where the people want it to be. right? And so as long as we allow for that evolution in a safe way, and we make sure to control and cultivate it the right way, it's going to be what it needs to be. It's one of the reasons we started this, is because some of the other platforms out there, the companies that control the platforms wanted it to be one thing, while the platform very obviously became something else. So to pull back and go, no, it has to be this, to me, that doesn't make sense, right? If the platform evolved into a different thing and the people want it to be something else, and the views are coming in based on what it's become, doesn't make sense. So that's one of the reasons we started this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would just add to that, right? We look at speak as a living organism, like George mentioned, right? So it is going to evolve with more knowledge, more experience, more information, more perspective. Your breadth and your depth, it enlarges, right? And George mentioned like a speak talk. So the essence of a speak talk is, within each speak talk, every speak talk, you have the moment of truth, the moment of transformation, and the moment of impact, right? So those are the three identifying moments within a talk or speak talk. But what I love about that is life is not linear, as we all know. Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? So the best you can do, like George mentioned, you create a vision, right? And this is important to me because I'm an engineer. So I understand about, designing how you have a vision, your destination, but then you backtrack into it and then you plan out how to execute that. So everything is really formed twice. So we have that framework, but you allow that framework to be filled based on the different experiences and information. So those three moments within each talk, but often what I share with the speakers, life is not linear. So those moments does not have to be sequential. It does not have to be linear, right? It's truth, transformation, and impact. But depending on how you write or just how your story unfolded, the impact moment might show up first. So when, I just say that to buttress the point when Joe's talking about the creative vision, like we have this framework to kind of guide and serve as goalposts, but we're not so rigid to stifle the speakers. Because I remember at beginnings, after the event, and somebody came to me and they had been to all of our previous events on the TEDx platform. They said, Fred, this was a different event. It just felt like the speakers were free. It just felt like the speakers were themselves. They weren't putting on a persona, and it just resonated emotionally. I look at George, I look at Jason, I'm like, we got it.
You got it. And, having gone through your process, it is very freeing. It is very freeing to sit down. And I remember for myself of just keeping those three things out front. I put that on the top of the page, right? And then just let myself be. And then at the end came back and said, where's my story? Have I touched? And I just truly let myself wrote without the structure of so often when I can't make this stuff up, guys. I had a meeting today about a speaking event that I'm going to be doing in October. And, it was like, okay, it was hitting the points. It was, this is our people. This is what we need to, you to deliver this, that, and the other thing. And you can have this much creative view, right? We have to keep it so structured. You give your speakers an opportunity to be so real and be so authentic in our process that it truly, as I was been watching speak now, from videos to being live at your events, is transformational. You feel that energy and you feel the emotion that transforms this platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you for that, Ivy, because it's good because you have things you plan. This is how I want it to be. But for people to experience exactly how you plan it to be is reaffirming. So I just want to thank you for that. And it was a joy working with you and going through the process. So just hearing that, it lets us know, we are on the right path.
So you have been knocking it out of the park, and how the both of you are keeping up, or actually the three of you, including Jason, how you're keeping up doing so many events that are coming out consistently at this time. What's your secret sauce here? How are you making this happen? Being here, and truly, this is not always just your full-time gig. You're both families. You have other, other companies that you're working in, businesses, and you're working with a ton of speakers. You're producing a ton of events. As a human being, let alone like, what's the secret sauce here? How are you doing this?
It's
the motto. I'll let George speak to that. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, it's the tripod, right? Like we couldn't do it without the tripod. There have been moments where each of the three of us needed the support of the other two because of work stuff going on, personal stuff going on, whatever. We got you, right? We got you. It's what we do. So once we kind of figured that out, because it was clunky in the beginning. In fact, very early on, we did Speak Beginnings. We had Speak Love planned as our second event, which was a couple of months after the first one. I fell ill, very ill. I was bedridden for over 4 weeks. I was really down for about 3 months, not myself. And the event kind of suffered for it, right? In terms of attendance and everything, the event was fine. But, at the time, I was the one working with the speakers. I did the marketing and the ticket selling, and the guys were doing other things. And we realized, oh, no. Like, we can't have one of us gets hit by a bus and Speak is gone, right? So we have to figure out how this works best with the three of us as a tripod, like as a true tripod, so that was a great learning experience for us, where we then took a little bit of a break for a few months before doing more events. We looked at what we did with the first 3 events and we said, okay, we're ready for phase 2. And we went out, and I remember we planned 6 shows within a couple of month period, and we knocked it out of the park. We said, okay, this is how it works. And it has evolved since then, where we have passed on responsibilities and roles back and forth to each other to see what works best as we grow this thing. In terms of the other stuff, you're building something, right? And it's important because, yes, this is a for-profit company. And yes, our mission is to amplify both adult and youth voices across the globe, but it's not just about for profit for us, right? There's a social enterprise portion to this, where we work with school districts, and we put on free shows at schools. We work with students to coach them to get on stages, and that it doesn't cost anything to them. And so we know it's a responsibility. Anytime there's a stage and a microphone and a spotlight involved, there's a responsibility. And we know that if we're going to do this, we have to do it the right way. Now you put our business hats on, the three of us, and we know what it takes from 3 different perspectives, right? I have other businesses. Jason has other businesses. Fred has another business, and he's an engineer as well. So it's like we have to balance all this stuff. But if we can trust each other and rely on each other in those moments, we know that there's nothing that we can't accomplish. But it's also a startup. And so we also know there are times where we're going to be working through the night and putting in way too many hours. But as long as we know, all I have to say is, guys, it's getting a little heavy at home because I've been spending so much time. And they go, we got you. And then I can step back and be with my kids and my wife and do my thing. And then Fred could do the same thing. It's a trust thing. It's all built to this thing. And the relationship between the 3 of us is the epicenter of everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I would add to, like I mentioned, the model too, right, Ivy? Everything George just mentioned, and also to, because this is a business podcast, and one of the greatest things that you can have in business is leverage, right? And how this model that we have, where we give our license to other producers to be able to put on their own events with our support in the background. That's how we've been able to have an event in Belfast, Ireland, an event in LA, in Texas, and all of that. And George can speak to minimal of those different events, because that's kind of his domain within the company. We have different parts. We know our roles, and we support one another, and we respect one another's roles, but we also overlap, like he mentioned, to assist wherever is necessary. But that point of leverage is so critically important, because that's the only way we can really scale, right? I believe it was J. Paul Getty who said, I'd rather have 1% of 100 people working for me than 100% of my own efforts. So that's how a speaker is going to scale. When we get more producers who are looking to put on their events and amplify other voices within their communities, people who we cannot reach, but they can reach. And through them, we can be able to offer the support. That's how we're able to make this thing juggle, but with the foundation of what we have, and that support coming from corporate.
I'll add one thing too, because this is a business podcast. It's very important for people to understand that we are trying to reinvent the way that these public speaking events work in order to affect the public speaking world in a big way, right? But on that same token, we're trying to reinvent the way organizations work, right? I'm a business expert by trade, but we're all business experts at the table here. And we come to business with three different mindsets. You have three very strong personalities between the three of us that have learned to really work together really well. So when we sat down initially to come up with the corporate structure, there's the big question: who's the CEO? Who's the CEO? And I remember Jason saying, I want to be on a level playing field, all of us, even though we're equal partners. One of us being the CEO is going to unbalance that level playing field. And I heard him and I said, you're right. So let's do it in a way that nobody has done it before. So we don't have a C-suite. We formed what we call the Co-Leadership Council. We are the co-leaders of Speak. Our official positions are the architect, the builder for Fred, and Jason is the engineer. Your title is what you do in the company. And that's it. And that might get a little hairy as we get bigger. But that's all that matters. The work you put in is what matters. We don't necessarily need to create a hierarchy, even amongst ourselves, for this thing to be successful as we continue to support other events and build this thing to scale. So it's something that down the road, I think this is going to be an interesting case study in business to see, how did this work out? Were they able to pull off this co-leadership council and continue it 3 years down the road when they have X amount of employees? So I hope you're rooting for us, Ivy, with this, because I am determined to make it work.
I am definitely rooting for you. And George, we both know we play in the similar space in business strategy. And I will say, very rarely will we accept, or will I accept, not a final decision maker at a leadership table. And it is incredibly bold and I love playing bold and love playing out of the box, to create a partnership that there is no, at the end of the day, when whatever happens and a decision has to be made, here's final. And I really like the way you build it as architects, right? Because in building a building, you need, right, great cement people, great brick people, great, electric, great plumbing, and the engineer and the architect that builds that all together and sees all the components to have it all. And each trade within is the leader and the head, so that makes sense. Being married to a contractor, of course.
It absolutely does.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're really trying. You look at things like what we're trying to do in the world here, in order to create a better atmosphere, a better ecosystem, a better environment. You're trying to put things into play that puts everybody on a level playing field, right? When we talk about diversity, when we talk about equity, when we talk about inclusion, right? And then I'm a sci-fi geek, right? So I look at something like, I watch Star Trek, where this thing is supposed to be hundreds of years in the future. And what's the main difference in the Star Trek world as opposed to where we are now? Well, they've taken money out of the equation, and they've taken like hierarchy out of the equation in a lot of ways. And you go, that's kind of a perfect system when you look at it. So it's like, if we can implement something now within our company's ecosystem that doesn't rely on, I'm better than you, I'm bigger than you, or whatever. And we're going to know, right? Jason will have an engineering team under him, and you might have 30 people that are called engineers, right? You might have a lead engineer, sure. Right. But But that's only to make a distinction for how we're going to complete this project, right? But if we kind of take a lot of that out of the equation and put everybody on a level playing field, because we know that for us, like, everybody's ideas are important. So as we continue building our team, we value everybody's ideas. When I consult for a company, when I go in as the turnaround expert to fix a broken company, I'm not just talking to the CEO. I'm talking to the security guard, I'm talking to the janitors. I'm talking to, the lowest level, like entry level employee, right? In terms of their hierarchy, to the highest level to figure out what's going on. And it's often somewhere in the middle there that we find the answers, right?
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, I want to ask one last thing. Has anything surprised you, or if so, what, since you've been building?
Surprise, I would say just the vulnerability amongst us, right? And there has been time where we will put business aside, because I believe in most of, if not everything we do, flows out of who we are.
Mhm.
So if the person is not right, what comes out of the person, the byproduct, the business, it's not going to be right. So we've had sessions where we're literally talking about one another, family, are you good, are you mental, your mental state, and all of that, right? And what has been surprising, well, not surprising, pleasantly surprising, let me say that, is just the willingness to go there, the willingness to be vulnerable. Because as men, I know this is predominantly a women audience, but I would just share insight, from a male perspective. That's something we struggle with, because we deal with ego. You don't want to seem less than. You think that I need to put on this facade. And the fact that we've been able to, and not without challenge, let me be clear, but rather easily, we've been able to drop that and allow one another to speak life into us during those down moments. I think it has been pleasantly surprising, because I've been, I'm a builder, I'm a life builder, I'm an engineer, and I take my engineering skills and now I build people. And I work with men, and to see that's a struggle, because we feel like no one understands. I'm the only one, but George gets it, Jason gets it, I get it. And when I say get it, it's not like we're standing on this pedestal and we're speaking like we have all the knowledge, but we understand that vulnerability is power, right? And together we're stronger. And we've been able to share intimate parts of our lives with one another without much resistance. And I think that has really helped us kind of go along. And Speak is less than 3 years old. And so that's what's pleasantly surprising, because we've been able to get to this place of transparency and vulnerability with one another rather quickly.
At a very, very short time. That's
Right.
beautiful.
Yeah, I'll agree with everything that Fred said, because like I said, the partnership has been everything, and exploring the partnership in our relationships has been everything to give us that impetus to then go to the next level, right? We are right now in the midst of planning our first main stage show, which is, March-ish of 2025. It's a big deal for us, right? However large it's going to be, whatever venue it's going to be, this is a big investment for us. It's, you might, if you didn't trust a partner, go, I don't know. I don't know if I could invest in that. But we believe in each other, right? And I'll tell you one more thing I'll add before we close out, is that, again, this is a female-centric business podcast, right? Where this strength comes from for us a lot of times is from the females in our lives. So our
Yes,
platform, first of all, our platform is 65% of our speakers are women. Predominantly, even when we were in the TED world, most of our applicants were women. So when we look at the diversity amongst our speakers and our audience, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of our speakers as we scale this thing to make it even more diverse. But I love the diversity between males and females in our audience, but in our speaker base. But the women in our lives have been everything to supporting us to build this thing as our partners, not just, oh, my wife supports me kind of thing. Like, my wife is my life partner in helping me to make decisions. And even though this is, my business with the boys here, she's every part of my decision making. I know Fred feels the same way. Jason, I met Jason through his partner Estella, who I've known since we were kids. So Fred gave a lovely speech at our 1 year our holiday party, which happened to be our, we were celebrating our 1 year anniversary of Speak, talking about his wife Cordelia and how she allows him to this space to be able to build something like this, right? So and they're every part of this, as are we, the three guys involved in this, our significant others, are every part is important for this, as we are. In fact, I was just texting my sister Cordelia earlier today, a belated birthday, as we were going on and on. We had a little love fest on each other this morning.
Well, Fred, George, how can our listeners learn more about Speak, lean into Speak, watch some Speak events and talks?
So speakevent.com is the website. You'll find everything from there. You scroll to the bottom, you'll see all of our social media links, including our YouTube, or you can click on the talks tab at the top to watch our talks. What's linked through the site is our YouTube channel. So call to actions here are please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And subscribe to the podcast, the Speak podcast, which is available on all major podcasting platforms. On social media, on most platforms, we are at Speak Event, singular event. X and Twitter is Speak_event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add this before we leave, through all those channels, if you're out there and you're interested in being a Speak producer, please definitely reach out to us. And we'd love to collaborate with you to amplify and to share people's stories, because, that's important to us.
So listeners, thank you so much for joining George, Fred, and I in our conversation today about the building of Speak Events, which is a great business model, doing some unusual things on the back end and the front end, which I truly admire and love. This is what I always say as we close out the show. Take a moment and take a breath. Think about, if you tuned in to listen today, what's that one thing that you can take away from today? What's your aha moment? And then make a decision by defining an action that you can take that will make a difference to your life and your business, your career, your world. Thank you again for joining us here today on Her Success Story. See you next time. Got mine.